So I want to be sure that I get everybody's names right. So I would ask, if you wouldn't mind, gentlemen, would you please introduce yourselves and a little bit about you to the audience? Could I ask you just to say 30 seconds about who you are? Starting with you at that end, thank you.
Yes, I introduced myself before. My name is Oliver Grün. I'm a software entrepreneur with a company called Grün Software AG in Aachen, and I represent as president the German and the European IT SME associations. Thank you.
My name is Reijo Smolander and representing Finpro. So that is Finland's export agency. So helping Finnish companies to establish and strengthen their business support abroad, and as well as getting investments in Finland. And the reason for me being is that when all you came to the conference, you most probably saw our Finland stand, Smart IoT from Finland. So basically we are working with the IoT companies and addressing how they could help the German companies to make a bit more out of the IoT. Thank you.
Yes, I think I already introduced myself during my speech. My name is Axel Sikora, being professor at the University of Offenburg, being head of the Institute of Reliable Embedded Systems and Communication Electronics, developing base stacks, 6-LoWPAN, embedded TLS, test stands, and so on. I'm also a deputy member of the board of Hahn-Schickard Association of Applied Research, which is one of the state-funded research associations in Baden-Württemberg, southwest Germany, where we are mainly concentrating on applications for Industry 4.0. And I'm also running a spin-off company which is called StackForce, being very active in the field of smart grid, smart metering communication.
My name is Andreas Neubacher, working for Deutsche Telekom. I'm working in the technology area, technology, architecture, and innovation. So in a department for standardization and IPR management, and I'm responsible for standards in the IoT and M2M area. And I'm also attending some of these forums, and also one M2M was mentioned, and also GBP. So it's something we are attending and monitoring.
Hello, I'm Stephen Mellor. You know that I am the CTO of IIC. In a previous life, I've done a lot of work with modeling of real-time systems, the modeling of software primarily, things like structured development for real-time systems way back in 1985. 3 books on that, a couple on object-oriented analysis, a couple on UML, Unified Modeling Language, and I'm a signatory to the Agile Manifesto, and now I'm IIC CTO.
Thank you, Stephen. My name is Peter Seeberg. I work for a company called Softing. We are a hardware and software company that is derived from industrial communication, data gathering. And I'm a business development manager for a new unit for industrial data intelligence. But I'm here to represent the OPC Foundation, and I'm sure we'll talk about OPC UA as a technology, as a open standard as we go.
Keep the microphone if you would, please, Peter, because I'm going to come to each of you in turn on a variety of topics, but I'd like to start with you, if I may. We've heard so much over the years about the need for standardization. How urgent is it for us to have more? We have achieved a little already, and we'll hear more about that. If we have more, what will we be able to do with it?
Yes, even more. No, we need standardization. I guess the only reason that we can sit here and that we can communicate, not just that we have decided that we're going to be here physically, at the physical layer, so to say, but we've agreed that we're going to talk in one language, which in this case is English. So for that reason, we understand each other. And I think we've heard it said of a couple of the speakers before that as far as I'm concerned, mainly at the higher level, where we talk semantics, ontology is where a lot of additional work is needed within industries. So OPC UA is kind of born within process industry, connecting the separate elements, the parts of IoT worlds, in order to be able to have pieces understand each other, we have to do a lot of work in at this level, actually.
Stephen, could you describe where we are at the moment? And we've heard little snippets from various different quarters this morning about the picture of standardization. Could you give our audience a big picture of how advanced we are in our search of standardization and where the key challenges remain?
That's a rather broad question. Let me start with where we are. I think we're in Düsseldorf. That's about all I can really say, because it depends on your context, right? If you're doing connectivity, you're talking machine to machine, I believe that there are a good number of standards to choose from. If you are working big data, cloudy kinds of things, then again, I think there are a fair number of standards, not quite so many, in my opinion, as there are for connectivity kinds of questions, because standards tend to grow from the bottom up. And so the cloudy kinds of standards have also grown, in one sense, bottom up, because of the need to manage data. That's the bottom in the IT world. It's not the bottom in the IoT world. But in the middle, we have some very interesting problems. How are we, for example, going to think about control? When we have autonomous vehicles running around, who exactly controls them when something goes wrong? What happens, for example, if they run out of power? What does it mean to be autonomous? Clearly, it'll stop if it runs out of power. But if there's some sensor failure, do you carry on? Do you slow down? What happens if you lose connectivity? What happens when all sorts of things go wrong? Does your connected car carry on? Does it stop? Does it gracefully degrade? All that kind of stuff is simply not being addressed. But I think the real question that we're going to have here is less how many standards do we have, and do we need more, and all that kind of thing, but working out where in this vast landscape a given standard belongs. OPC UA, of course, is a standard that's well understood in the process industry. But I think that it's probably going to be better in the longer run not to focus on the verticals, but rather what the specific issues are in the process industry. Namely, it tends to be local, you're in one factory, you have a lot of metal around, so you can't do certain things. Try to characterize the kinds of architectures in which each standard works. So Richard Soley, who I mentioned before, the executive director of IIC, is also the chairman of the Object Management Group, a industry-based standards development organization. And he likes to say that standards are wonderful, there are so many to choose from. And I think when I go into a supermarket and I look at, let me find some breakfast cereal, I have so many choices, my brain explodes. What we need in our space is a way to characterize where standards work best. That's going to be the way in which we go from 3,500 standards, or whatever number you pick out of the air, down to something that's actually useful on your project.
Yeah, Andreas, this is kind of in your province within T-Mobile. Describe, as you described, if you would, your role to me earlier, bringing together an understanding throughout the group of all the different standards there are available, as Stephen has referred to, and then what you do with that information.
Yeah, I think the question about standards is, it's not a question about doing more and doing other standards. I think there are a lot of standards already there. It's like a supermarket, as you said. But I think if you look from more detail on it, so we heard already that there's a difference between quasi-standards or sometimes products. So you might say Amazon Cloud is a product or it's a standard, but at the end it's a product. But we are looking at open standards, so interoperability. I think what we should think of is something like GSM we had in the past. So it was an initiative between a couple of European countries, and it grew up a 6 billion market of devices. So we have already done quite a lot in this area, and we have been good in this area. But others have taken over this area somehow. And if you look at IoT, I think it's important to have a common language. It was already expressed a couple of times, for example, semantic interoperability. It's like a language. If I would talk Swahili here, nobody would understand me probably. That's the reason why we talk English. For machines, is something, even if you use, for example, GSM or any other connectivity as we have today, or NB-IoT, it's just the transport. It's not the language. And the semantic interoperability is key. This brings us to the question of relevance. So if you look down all the 500, I don't know, or whatever number of standards bodies or consortia, so if you took out the more proprietary ones, the more company ones, let me say standards, to the open standards, and if you look at the relevant standards, then there are not that many around anymore. So we have 3GPP, which made a 6 billion market for the devices, for the connectivity. We have one M2M, we heard, it's a partnership project like 3GPP, so it's with one standard you have a lot of partners around, which enable a lot of, also the ecosystem, a lot of, let me say, small companies to develop applications for the sensors and for the devices. And this is, I think, where we are currently. So I think we just need to grab what's already there. And we have already seen implementations there. Usually in my former projects, I was always called that, when is the standard available? But those standards are already there and they are already implemented predominantly in Asia at the moment, but I hope that this will also come to Europe.
Axel, in your research environment, you must be seeing an awful lot of challenges around the fragmentation that we were hearing about earlier. How do you address that in an academic environment?
That's a tricky question because we are always tempted to follow your slide saying, yes, we want to have one general standard, and then we are tempted to invent the 15th standard adding to the 14 existing, which we did for a couple of years. Research and R&D projects, I should better call them, are nowadays much more about integration projects and trying to make flexible interfaces, flexible middleware architectures to be as open as possible, to interconnect to as many different alternatives as possible. So it's much of integration work that we are doing there.
Reijo, the question that struck me while I was trying to think about how we address this. Can we even call this a standardized environment yet? Or is it a little bit like pregnancy? You are either standardized or you're not.
Yeah. Okay, I guess it's, first of all, on this where we are, it's an interesting question on there. And perhaps a way I would like to kind of address on that one is that coming back to, okay, how these standards are kind of formed. If we think back history on the telecommunication side, the standards were created and, okay, after that, let's say things were done. I think nowadays let's say technology develops so quickly and let's say the business benefits that it creates are so huge that let's say the business just doesn't have time to wait. So in that sense, whatever is available will be definitely used. But okay, that doesn't take the way of need for the standards. Definitely those are needed, but perhaps they are kind of something which are developing along the, let's say, how the development goes. So they are formed based on that. And okay, when they are, let's say, mature enough, then they kind of form their places. So they come kind of this de facto way how they are used. So in that sense, okay, are we fully pregnant or somewhere in between? I guess we are somewhere in between, but actually in fairly early stage.
Oliver, we've been looking at so many different industry verticals, and even this morning we've covered quite a few. Is there in your mind an order of urgency for dealing with standards so that we can bring certain industries into line so that they can even be delivered? At the moment, there's so much talk around smart cities, but effectively smart cities are an integration of so many different applications. How do you see Germany, for example, tackling this?
Well, I think smart cities is an additional integration. I think more important would be from the impact and industries like industrial IoT or autonomous vehicles, because they are the basis of our prosperity. I think this is more important, more urgent for us to find standards in these areas than in areas like smart home or smart city, but this is my opinion. I think the whole problem we have is that the speed of digitalization is much more higher than our discussion process and our German deep over-engineering process will be ready. I think we have a problem of the speed. And as mentioned before, I also think that it's a good way to use middleware. So if you're an SME company or so, middleware is a very good possibility to be half standardized, to find to develop middlewares which connect standards from some points.
Yeah, Stephen, I think you wanted to say something regarding smart cities and IoT.
It wasn't so much smart cities, because your question was a bit more general than that.
Yes.
If you go back to the slide that I showed about the Industrial Internet Interoperability Coalition, you'll see that it had 3 dimensions shown. One of them was the verticals. Of course, smart cities is one of those. The second one was horizontals, and specifically use cases, because there are horizontal use cases, a phrase that I think is reasonably well known, but if not, what we mean is things that are not specific to a particular application. So horizontal use cases like remote monitoring that apply to smart cities, to manufacturing, to transportation, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we need to do is to be able to abstract standards across those verticals in that use case. Right? So that way we have a way of doing remote monitoring of anything. I don't care whether it's a city or it's a person in a hospital bed. It's the same underlying question. So because there is so much to do, and I agree entirely with your statement that people will use what's already there. But if we're going to avoid the fragmentation that I think we need to, because otherwise we will fail to grow the market, then we have to build those abstractions, and we have to get working on those new standards, but we can't do everything at once. And that's the purpose of those pins, to say, all right, can we, by looking across these 2 or 3 verticals, abstract a set of use cases that will address a problem across this way, deploy it, and then we'll find out what works, what doesn't, and then change it as needed.
Yeah. Andreas, what were your thoughts on that?
I think the middleware discussion is a quite good one, and also smart cities. I think brings me back to the language story. So if you think about a sensor, a GPS sensor, every smartphone has a GPS sensor. So if you have I'm also having a smart sports watch, it's also equipped with GPS. So you have a car equipped with GPS. So the GPS coordinate is a GPS coordinate. From a technical point of view, everything is the same. From a marketing point of view, this is a variable. The other one is in the vertical automotive. So I think the characterization of verticals is more a marketing one, because you sell a car, you expect a car in a car shop and not in a supermarket. And this is the reason why we have this categorization of verticals. From technology point of view, it's like in Josef's slides before, it's a vertical, it's just the data. You need to align the data, you need to unite the language somehow. And this is the semantics or ontology, the semantics interoperability. And this is, for example, on a large scale, on the wide area scale, which is one M2M providing to the world somehow. On the question of other standards bodies, so we have OPC-UA, for example, it's an industrial domain. So this is the expertise where all the engineers being experts in industry are getting together. So and they are doing a good job in their sandbox. But there's another sandbox, for example, for the home domain. So in the home domain, there are other devices, for example, they have a different lifetime also. For example, if you have a light bulb, for example, which you throw away, if it's broken, you throw away also the electronics, the communication unit. So it's a different also lifetime of the product. So what you need to have is let me say, a certain set of open standards, enabling an ecosystem, enabling, for example, the whole industry to make money out of it. I think this is the important point. And you also have certain standards, which is you can expect a certain glue together the certain different standards.
Peter, how can the OPC play a role in assisting this progress?
Well, I think the way that you were just saying it right now, because OPC UA is already an official standard, like a legal, de jure standard, as well as a de facto standard within the segment industrial and process. There have been up until 25 organizations that have knowledge standards have decided to go on top of OPC UA. They've said, because OPC UA within that space has this very powerful information modeling capability, all the other standards have said, let's not try to go through the process ourselves, but sit on top of this standard within this market segment, which has this capability. So that's the role OPC UA is playing within the industrial segment, I guess, trying to move into other sub-segments. But I think in the end, we're going to see that with, 10 sub-segments and 100 standards, in the other sub-segments, there are today already top 1, 2, 3 standards that may survive, and they all need to come together at a higher level. But within the industrial process area, that's the role that OPC UA can play for other knowledge standards at a higher level.
Yeah, this is a question for all of you, and I please put your hand up if it's something you feel that you can comment on. But in June of this year, 3GPP completed the standardization of NB IoT, narrowband IoT. And there's a radio technology developed for the Internet of Things. It's relatively quickly achieved in 9 months and has been incorporated into LTE Release 13. Is this, as we've been led to believe, a bit of a breakthrough moment, or is it just another step in along the way? Axel.
I'm very happy that 3GPP really made these steps and did them so fast. However, we should also say that these steps came at a relatively late stage and only under the pressure of other narrowband technologies like the LoRa or the Sigfox. Without this pressure, I think the process would have been much more lengthy. For me, this is another step into the right direction, but it also is a major step. But we should also, because it really might enable ubiquitous computing in a much more seamless way than we have seen it before. But we are again here on the lower layers, and as I try to make clear in my presentation, the lower layers are not the challenge nowadays. The challenge is on the application layer, on the semantics, on the ontology. So for me, the narrowband IoT is a good step, a major step into a good direction, but it does not solve the other problems that we just discussed.
Yeah, Andreas, you're nodding. This is something that you found too?
Yeah, I think quite good summary. So this is the lower layer. So but what we can take out as a positive sign, for example, that the standards can be fast. So even if they started slow or late, so they are fast, and if the industry is aligned. And I also admit that really the key point is on the semantics, on the higher layers, on the IT layers. And this is also, let me say, IT is always quite fast. And this is something also being a kind of throwback, because everybody starts, implementing something, but if you get on a higher scale with a lot of devices, a lot of interoperability, if you get aware that the car also may need to talk to a roadside unit because the lamp mast or the warning you about road conditions needs to talk the same language, then you get across, okay, I need to have partners, I need to define a language. If the pole sends me a warning sign, that I understand the warning sign. And this needs to be also understood by different cars and different applications. This is where the standards are key and where you can't get around the standards. So all the visions we have around, for example, self-driving cars would not be possible without standards, I think. That's one point. And I think also there was Dr. Grün mentioned it for example, that in Europe we need also to think about the sharing of data and enabling what other companies in the world are doing already. I think there's the great chance also that the things are talking, the things are generating data. And for example, you may have a scale at home, And I have my fitness watch. It gives me a report, for example, if the scale delivers data and also my fitness watch delivers data, it gives me an impression about my health status. But I also may share the data, not necessarily with my wife, but with my fitness coach about the weight, for example. He gives me a diet plan, for example. Those are something we could enable with some kind of control point in an environment. And also this is something also where diversity, a lot of different companies gives you kind of also security and credibility. For example, if you have a control point somewhere which is standardized, because you can see what is on the interfaces, you can trust them then.
Reijo, is there anything that you could add from Finpro's viewpoint?
What I would actually comment, let's say, from the, let's say, speed point of view, that, okay, we just talked that, okay, on technical side, the speed of development is accelerating all the time. So it's on the business side as well. So basically the, let's say, horizon that the companies, or let's say the business decisions are done, it's much shorter. And then looking from the, let's say, standardization point of view, in order that to keep up to pace, either, okay, it keeps up to pace, or then if it's too quick, then it needs to also kind of be admitted the role that the standardization has. If it comes then later, okay, it comes later, but it has still the role. But okay, then the role is a bit different than what it used to be. So I think it's kind of that's the challenge, how to manage the speed, how to manage the, let's say, effectiveness.
Oliver, did you have anything to add on this?
To the 3GPP completion, it's very. We also agree with this. So it's, of course, we have the advantage that IoT providers run less risks of interferences, so everything is a little bit more interoperable. So I think all the things which are coming up, like the new release from LTE, with the new incorporated in the new LTE release, the 3GPP project is the same like the new release of one M2M, that everything which is more going in direction to more interoperability is good. And yeah, some things are a bigger step and some are smaller. But every step in this direction is good, because we need the best of breed possibility when everything is communicating in the Internet of Things alone.
Yeah, alone. One of the things that concerned me when I came across it recently was a comment from the Open Mobile Alliance, which, for anyone not familiar with it, is an organization of mobile operators, and one M2M, which is 8 ICT standards bodies. And it was said in January that there is a growing divide between the standards development organizations that define how wireless networks operate their services and the application developers creating apps for use on the networks. Is this a problem, or was this ever a problem? Is it something that we should be concerned about?
A small comment. I don't think there's a growing divide. I think it's always been there. The problem now is that we can see it. So in answer to one of your prior questions, I mentioned that we have a dearth of standards, quotes, in the middle. Semantic interoperability is obviously extremely important, but that also must include control. Exactly how you decide who takes charge, whether you continue to execute the strategy as given to you, or whether you tactically look at the situation and say, well, there is something different going on here, I need to do something else. So that gap definitely exists, but I don't think it's necessarily widening, it's just there. We're in front of it now.
Yeah, and it's more in our faces. Andreas?
Yeah, as you asked this question, so one quote came to my mind. So from the point of a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So this happens if you're on Telekom, for example. Then if you look from a Telekom point of view on it, then it's just connectivity, and then you accept it with NB-IoT, for example, and 3G and LTE. But if you look on the ICT side, which we also have in our company, everything looks like an application. I don't care about the transport. And this is exactly the point where both things are getting together. And we have seen also the nice presentation from Josef, that the developer as such, you can't, let me say, teach the developer to be an engineer in telecommunications and transport, nor vice versa. And the solution is simply to do the abstraction, to do not even bother, let me say, the application programmer with all the physics around wireless or wired connectivity. So we also have seen this, let me say, abstraction somehow in the smartphone area. So we introduced a kind of operating system. The provider of the smartphone operating systems, they provide, for example, the APIs to the sensors within the device, and it enabled a huge community of developers. And the same shall happen also with IoT. So then we have a rich market and a rich ecosystem where everyone has great ideas and where also the business is increasing and also developing even more. And standards like NB-IoT is just a part of it and putting us further.
Yeah, Peter, please.
Yeah, and maybe I want to pick up on what you said there. I think really looking what this should be about is that, I'm not sure you've seen this wonderful video, I think, of Microsoft, the new Skype, and there's this school of Spanish children, and they're talking to this American school of American kids, and it's an amazing video. So what is happening is that there's young people not capable of understanding the other language, and Skype is on the fly taking care of it. They're communicating. So what I like is this view of what it is that we should be moving forward to is just making it work one way or the other. Of course, I mean, we're being asked to make it work, but in the end, that's what it is, right? I mean, just making sure that the different segments of IoT are going to be able to do exactly that, communicate, just without understanding what happens on the way.
We're essentially at a very optimistic moment, and I don't want to spoil that in the closing remarks, but I'm going to ask each of you in 30 seconds or less, because we are quite tight for time, if you just give me your thoughts on what you would like to see tackled as a priority by this industry over the next year, so that when we sit here next year, we can perhaps talk about some progress. Stephen, thank you.
Security, it's that simple. If there is a major disaster in the next year or two that actually kills people, we're dead, basically. We have a real problem because no one will accept the kinds of things that we're trying to do. So we have to address it, we have to address it right away, and we have to improve it continuously.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I start with the introduction of Dr. Fink with the puzzle. I think before we start with the cornerstones of a puzzle, I think we should take an overlook about what are the puzzle stones and where are the cornerstones to provide. And I think what I would like to see from industry is to look, for example, at the important and the relevant standards and the open standards and build in their segments and their vertical products based on this one. And then we also have the standards being the glue in between all those different segments and verticals.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to see ongoing integration, as we have discussed. I think that's pretty clear. I completely agree with Stephen that security is a major issue, not only in providing the end-to-end security using TLS or DTLS or using authentication, but what I think is really needed is some kind of data autonomy also for machines, so that they can preserve their privacy. So pretty much comparable to what we see with people, where it mostly works, sometimes it does not work, but we would need something similar for machines so that they also can decide who to share information with and who not to not forward the information to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was also compliment, okay, is it a question of security, but okay, the privacy, the importance of that one. Clearly it is on the, let's say, consumer side, it's even more important, but okay, with the amount of data used in, let's say, real-time business decision, also the privacy will definitely be a really key factor that, okay, will companies go, will people go in there, do they trust on there? And naturally more important, it will come then when we are talking about this horizontal let's say, data transfers, and horizontal kind of really pulling the things together, putting the things and data together and making conclusions from there. So if companies, if people do not trust the privacy, it won't fly.
Yes, generally I also agree with the topic security. But you normally have to stress behaviors which are underrepresented, and I think in Germany and Europe the security topic is not underrepresented, so it's very, very important. We have, I think, a big step with the new one M2M specification where we have end-to-end security and other things. I think this is a small step, again, in the right direction. But I think much more important is to learn what our American friends know. Just go ahead and invent new business models. That is, for me, the most important thing.
Yeah, and Peter?
Yeah, I think it's about sitting together between the different segments and work on the basis of open standards. So, I mean, I think, specific companies that have specific ideas of doing certain things that should put their maybe strong character on the side and say, we need to go open source, open standards-based security, yes, most certainly. And within, as an example, industrial environment, I can say that security has been ticked off by German BSI, but that is within that security. I'm not saying that is for the complete world. Be open, talk among the different segments. So, OPC talking with, I saw it on the fall before with one M2M, et cetera, et cetera. So work across sub-segments on the basis of open standards.
Gentlemen, we've run out of time, but I can't thank you enough for your contributions, which have been excellent. Please give a huge round of applause to our panel. Oliver, Reijo, Axel, Andreas, Stephen, Peter, thank you very much.